some of the people that I met were what they call themselves one law. Have you heard of like the one law movement? Or I'm sure there's probably another name, but I've been out of circulation for a while. But I was on this one, back when I was on Facebook, I was on this forum. Rabbi Schiffman and Rabbi Bernstein and I were the moderators of that forum. And so I posed a question once, and I asked, I said, do the one law movements believe that the whole Torah is for the people of God, whether Jew or Gentile, and that the adoption of the Torah is a sign that one has become a member of God's family and a recipient of the covenants? I did say one law movements because seems like there's a whole lot of them. So after several accusations of being dishonest, my question was dishonest, I had to restate the question, but I really received no good answers. Since some laws are specifically for men or women, and some laws are for the Cohen and for the Levi or Israel, there are a whole series of laws that are more specialized and as such are not for everyone. Under one law, things like dietary law, moedim, the cleanliness laws, to name but three, are examples of laws that belong to all who have faith in the God of Israel. However, one must set aside Torah to adopt this theory of one law. So I'd like to explain that. You shall not eat of any carcass, the Torah says in Devarim. You can give it to a sojourner within your gates, and you can eat it, or you can sell it to a stranger, for you are a holy people to Hashem your God. While this verse is the main text of interest, there are other passages that probably should be considered as well. One of them is from Bereshit 9:3, and it says, every creeping thing that is alive, for you it is food, as the whole of green herb. This is right after the flood. Okay, only flesh with its life or its blood you shall not eat. And then in Shemos it says, you are holy men to me, or holy people. Flesh torn in the field you shall not eat. To a dog you shall cast it. Another one in Vayikra chapter 11 says, when any of the beasts that are food for you dies, he who comes against its carcass is unclean until the evening. And he who eats the carcass must wash his garments and be unclean until the evening. And he who lifts the carcass must wash his garments and shall be unclean until the evening. Lifts his garment, I've always kind of understood that to be at some point somebody's got to bury it. Also in Vayikra chapter 17, it says, any person who eats a carcass or torn thing among natives or among sojourners shall both wash his garments, bathe in water, and shall be unclean until the evening. Then he shall be clean, and if he doesn't wash or bathe his flesh, then he shall bear his iniquity. In the beginning, plants were the exclusive diet of all land animals, and that comes from the first chapter of Bereshit. Now, there is room for argument that fish, because they don't have the breath of life, were not given the commandment to eat plants for food. This would mean none or some were omnivorous, which would kind of make sense because somebody's got to clean the water. So therefore, from the creation until the days of Noah, there was one diet for all mankind, and it involved plant life. I assume that it's plain, cooked, boiled, steamed, fresh, spiced, fried, or baked, depending on your palate. After the deluge, Hashem expanded the diet to the descendants of Noah, and it goes without saying that the descendants of Noah include both the Gentile nations and the progenitors of the Jewish people. The reason why I bring this particular point up is that all of mankind were able to consume anything, plant and animal, as long as limbs were not torn from the body and that the blood was not consumed. As an interesting aside, the Septuagint translates creepy things in Genesis 9:3 as reptiles. But the addition of all indicates anything that moved. That would include animals that are declared clean and unclean. That was the diet. Exodus 22:30 is a restriction of the Jewish diet. where animals that are torn in the field are not to be eaten. Torn in the field is a direct reference to animals mortally wounded or killed by predators, or wild animals or birds of prey. The Septuagint uses the term taken of beasts, and I like that translation a lot. That's very cool. The Talmud in Chulin 37a, 67b, provides a description of the types of injuries that render an animal to be considered treifa, or torn. Additionally, if animals were unable to survive and or if the animal lost certain vital components to its body, it is considered torn even if it's still alive and even if it heals. While a torn animal cannot be eaten, we are able to benefit from its carcass as long as it doesn't involve eating. And also we can't benefit from the fats as far as eating it, because that is the equivalent portion that would be put on the altar. That's God's food, not us, not for us. A question arising from the statement, if we cannot eat animals that die of physical injury, are we able to eat animals that die of itself? And after all, a negative commandment is bound in Halacha. Leviticus 7:24 provides a catalyst for the answer when it makes a surprising distinction between an animal that dies and an animal that is torn to death. Now we have a second type of carcass. Animals that die of itself, be it old age, disease, or some unknown cause. Immediately in Leviticus 7:23, the text prohibits the consumption of sacrificially equivalent fats from both carcass types, torn or that die of itself. Additionally, all blood, be it from a live animal or any carcass, is strictly prohibited and carries with it the penalty of kares, which is being cut off. Another question now arises. We understand eating all blood and all sacrificially equivalent fats are prohibited, as well as the meat from torn animals, but are we allowed to eat the carcass of an animal that dies of itself? We receive our answer from Leviticus 11:40, where the restriction against eating an animal that dies of itself is presented. Additionally, Leviticus 17 also includes the same restriction on birds who either die or are torn. The text presented here have a surprising twist that should not be ignored. Leviticus 17 restricts eating blood from both Bnei Israel and the convert, or the ger, and provides a kares penalty. Interestingly, this is the same restriction given to all mankind in Genesis 9:3, with no penalty attached, meaning Jews and proselytes are held to a higher standard than all of mankind. Until Leviticus 17, there has been no distinction between convert or Jew, in regard to food, that is, which indicates this particular negative commandment, eating blood, is bound to include both converts and blood. The rule cannot be loosed to include eating carcasses or fat. And at some point, I think I'm going to try to explain the difference between binding and loosing commandments, because that's important, especially in the words of Yeshua. So that'll come. I just have to work on it. As a support, Moshe Rabbeinu in Devarim 14 tells us that no Jew may consume a carcass. However, he states we can give it to a convert, a ger, or we can sell it to a stranger, a nakri, which is foreign, alien, stranger. All those can be a nakri. So there is no attempt on my part for dishonesty here. A simple search will find several references to one law, the term one law, in the Torah, prior to Leviticus 17 and after. But all these references are contextually referring to korban, to sacrifice. The first being Exodus in relation to the laws of Korban Pesach and the requirement of bris milah. Additionally, Exodus 12 provides for a stranger who dwells with you who wants to keep the Pesach. Again, this indicates keeping Pesach is an option for the stranger who dwells among you. Now, with symmetry across all the verses, we can see that the simple concept of one law, which is the whole point of all this, in regard to dietary restriction, is disingenuous. Therefore, the concept of one law, as the movement goes, drowns in the convert's stew pot. the crux of it when it comes to Messianic Judaism. I see Torah observance as kind of concentric circles, where the Jew is commanded to keep Torah as we're able to keep Torah, because there are several things in Torah that we can't keep because we don't have a temple. So when it comes to the proselyte, the ger, Christian coming into Judaism, while they are not commanded to keep all of the law of Torah, they do have the ability to keep that by choice. But again, it's not by command. And I'll say there's a however with that. And the however is, in the same way that if you begin to light 3 Shabbos candles on Shabbos, you can't suddenly decide to go back to 2. Because we're supposed to increase the light of the world, our light in the world, not decrease it. So we do 2 candles. You start to do 3, you forever do 3. So if you as a Gentile begin to keep Torah, don't decide, you know what, I'm not commanded, I'm not going to do it anymore. Because now you've reduced the light in the world. Yeah. But again, it doesn't lift Israel above anybody else. I mean, the fact that you have the option and do is actually greater than somebody who's commanded and does. So it's no person is being lifted above another.